Right, so hey guys, super excited today. Today's webinar is really a huge one-off. So we've got Sunny here, okay? I'll get
Hello. Sunny
to, introduce himself, but we're going to be mainly talking about the topic of stress. All right, so Sunny, introduce yourself and we'll get started.
Okay, introduce yourself, go. So I'm interested in stress, I guess, because I've lived a fairly checkered past. I've done a few different things that have taken me off the beaten track. I was originally trained as an engineer, and after working for the Department of Defence for a bit, had a bit of a change of track and ended up in Asia doing aid and development work. And that saw me working in anti-human trafficking projects in Laos, so which is a communist tropical Southeast Asian country. So I loved that work so much that I ended up staying on for another 7-8 years after that. And I went from being like this nerdy little bookish kid in Canberra who kind of like the idea of being out there in the world, to being this guy who was in the jungle in a communist country doing things that I was passionate about, but also dealing with all of the things that you deal with when you're doing that. So I got bitten by mosquitoes, I got bitten by dogs, I got run over by vehicles, I got interrogated by secret police. I did all these sorts of things that at the time were an adventure, but over the course of the years kind of wear you down a bit. Like there's a bit of stress involved.
Absolutely.
And the only way that I really was able to be able to kind of follow that passion and do that work was that I discovered some old Chinese methods or modalities, or even models of understanding the body and of deeply kind of, shifting the nervous system so your body was actually functioning in a different way. And so my passion became how I could learn these practices deeply so that I could more fully follow this passion that just happened to be kind of challenging. And it turns out that I loved it so much that I was able to learn enough that now I can share it with other people.
Fantastic.
And it turns out that it turns out that the stress that you deal with in a public service job here in Canberra, actually, although on the surface looks totally different from dealing with, whatever's going on in the world, inside of the body there's no difference. Inside the body there's no difference. Wow. And we'll be digging into this topic a lot more in this webinar, but the key outcome of this webinar for you guys is to be able to, find out what stress really is. Okay, we all know what it kind of feels like, or maybe we don't know what it feels like, but how it actually relates to this weight loss journey that you're on at the moment, and how it actually helps you, find yourself a lot more, feel more grounded, and essentially, have a freer, healthier, and stronger, sustainable lifestyle. So, if we don't deal with stress, we have lots of bad things that go on. Okay, and we'll be digging into this further into the webinar. But let's go into stress. So, what is it? What is it, Sunny? So, the interesting thing is people have been researching stress for quite a while now, and I even, in some of the, when I was kind of reading through, I even read that the original researchers of stress actually said, we all think we know what it is, but we don't know how to define it.
Okay.
So it's kind of interesting, right? So I think if we're looking at kind of what's going on in the body, stress is your fight-flight system being turned on. So we evolved with a nervous system. We'll talk about part of that nervous system, which is the autonomic nervous system.
Awesome,
Okay, so we can talk about, that's the bit that kind of takes care of all the things that we don't think about. So breathing, heart rate, digestion, all those sort of things happen on autopilot. And there's part of that nervous system that turns on when we're trying to survive, and it increases blood flow to our muscles, it decreases blood flow from our heart, from our digestion, and that's called the sympathetic nervous system, or we call that the fight-flight response. Obviously great when you're trying to run away from something, or you're trying to fight, or whatever. However, one of the things that's interesting about the autonomic nervous system and about stress is that if you've got the fight-flight system on, you can't do anything else. Your body doesn't recover, your body doesn't repair, your body doesn't rest. That's the other part. You've got to turn the fight-flight system off and turn on the rest and digest function. We can go more into the detail of that later.
Or even now, like you talked about some of the things that happen to our body when we are in that fight or flight response. So can you just kind of go deeper into what things that the clients might be experiencing?
So elevated heart rate. So literally, you can check it out for yourself. As you're inhaling, if you become aware of your heart rate, and then you inhale, you'll feel it beat at a certain rate, and then you exhale, it'll beat at a slower rate. So the inhale is actually your fight, flight. Your body is on sympathetic mode.
Yeah.
So your heart rate increases. Quite often people find that they actually don't make good decisions. Why is that? We're going to survival thinking, right?
Yeah.
I had a chat to a guy yesterday who told me that when he was starting to swim, or he's learning to swim, and he's starting to swim, and what happens is his body goes, you can't breathe, your feet can't touch the floor, touch the ground, you might be drowning. The body goes into survival. He loses all sense of what he was doing when he was in there, like trying to train to swim.
Yeah.
Going into kind of like panic.
Yeah.
And even if our body doesn't feel like it's drowning, if we're in some sort of survival mode, our brain switches into that kind of like, oh, I've got to survive something here.
Yeah. Really.
So our thinking goes from being kind of expansive and creative to being like, I've got to kill that or survive it or whatever. I mean, how often have we had that experience where we're giving a speech, we've prepared, we get up in front, like we're not all sorted, and then you know what happens? You're like, something happens, and you forget. Or and it doesn't have to be that dire. It could be you rehearse heaps and heaps with all these nice words and pauses and everything, and then you get up there and you speak fast.
Yes.
Because we're trying. So that's what happens. Our options kind of shut down. Our options shut down when we're in the sympathetic mode. Elevated temperature, sweat of the hands, on the skin, the mouth becomes clammy. If it goes on for longer, we can start dealing with discomfort in the body. We can start talking about trouble with the digestion. I've got some notes, let me just check.
Yeah, of course. So guys, like these symptoms here, Sunny was talking about is kind of like your immediate responses to stress.
You can become aware of like in the moment.
Yeah, like in the moment of stress. So now, based on that, I've heard, that this fight or flight response, so I just want to tie it back down into weight loss here. So if your body is actually in this fight or flight response, fighting away all the lions, traditionally is what we used to do. In your mind, very, very true. Then how is that actually related to wanting to lose weight and wanting to get your body in a healthier state?
Sure. Okay. So I think that's really good to look at, because we've got short-term and long-term effects of stress. I mean, the short-term effects of stress, if you go for a run, that's stressful on your body, right?
Yeah.
So that's positive stress. So they actually call that EU stress, so eustress.
Yeah.
There's negative stress, which is like de-stress, which is actually the opposite. And so if we look at the amount of stress versus the amount of time that we've got a little graph here we can kind of map out with our hands. Okay, all right. So we've got. Hey, let's have a look at that. We've got the amount of stress. We've got productivity at this angle, or effectiveness with the body.
Yeah.
Versus the amount of stress on this angle. So as the stress increases, we become more effective. So as the stress increases, we're able to kind of still function.
Yeah.
However, when it comes to weight loss, we've got to look at what happens with long-term stress and what happens to our, let's say, negative decision-making processes.
Yeah.
Survival thinking.
Yes.
So after some point, the amount of payoff that we get for an increase of stress decreases, and then it plateaus, and then it starts coming back down. At that point, we're actually starting to experience negative stress. And the body's becoming worn down, it's becoming tired, it's becoming depleted, we're becoming worried. All of these, neural networks that become more active when we're stressed become like habitually on. So we become kind of like a worry or a stressor, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So if someone's going to be a worried or a stressful eater, if they've got these patterns kind of more deeply ingrained in their brain, then they're more likely to go, oh, I feel tired. I couldn't be bothered doing that thing, which was either making the salad or doing the this or doing the that. I'll just go and grab, I don't know, like those Croatian cakes I've got over there. I'll go for convenience.
I'll go for the convenience. Yes, very much so. Yeah, and I love how you said that it was, your body gets into this like state where it can't actually function optimally.
No.
Function optimally. So I guess talk to me more about the longer term side of things.
Sure.
In terms of what symptoms that my clients experience. So for example, some of you guys might be experiencing like tiredness, sleepiness, and I don't know. Keep elaborating on the different things.
So if that keeps on going and the stress increases and people can't get away from it, then at some point our body goes into what we might call some sort of depletion or even breakdown. Mm-hmm. And what happens then is you start to deal with possibly even permanent changes to the brain. Yeah. Which means that we can kind of that's when the sugar addictions might start. Yeah. Or I just find myself wanting to eat fatty carbohydrates. That kind of like, I just want to feel safe, right? Or we might be dealing with so when we look at stress in the body, it's also important to look at the hormonal system. Yeah. The hormonal system is called the endocrine system. We all know about the thyroid. We all know about the adrenals. Of course, there's a bunch of other things there. But looking at adrenal function and stress levels, so what happens is that our adrenals basically get left on. And so if we're watching a stressful movie and we get that kind of like, that afraid feeling, that's adrenaline. At some point, our body becomes accustomed to having adrenaline running. Yeah. And the longer that runs, the more likely we are to have that adrenal fatigue. And that means that then people are going to have things like the inability to lose belly fat. Once again, unable to eat the kind of food that they would like to eat, but kind of go back to these primal eating patterns of higher carbs, higher fat, higher sugar, feel good stuff. Yeah, for sure. So essentially what you're saying is that if we want to be able to lose weight, we've got to kind of reduce our stress, because the stress in our body, guys, it causes our body to kind of hold on to fat. It doesn't actually allow us to lose it. And some of you guys might be struggling for years, even your whole lives potentially, and trying to lose weight. Or not even whole lives, you can see it in families. Yeah. So it's the kind of thing that, like, they're even doing studies now, they call it epigenetics. So what happens to the grandparents happens to the parents, happens to the grandchildren. And so there are markers and there are signals that are sent with the genetic material when the new child is born, so that certain things get turned on under stress. Yeah, right. And so when things get turned on under stress, you might find that you keep on, you keep fighting a certain fight, and in fact, it's no longer a conscious battle for you just to kind of try and lose weight. Your system does something different. Yeah, right. And like, I guess these days, the stresses that we experience are completely different. I mean, we don't really need to go hunting for food anymore. No. We did, with this system was so useful back in the day when we were hunting for animals, like going on like caveman days. But these days... Did you say caveman days? Caveman days, yeah, totally. Right. Absolutely. All right. I'm going to go on a caveman day. I just imagine a caveman going, I'm going to go on a caveman day. You just switch it on just like that, really. Easy as. But now these dresses, it's different. It's totally different, like completely different. So, Sunny, do you know what some of the top stresses are for people? I just realized this last week. Work. I just looked at the slides. Work. Yeah. Life gets in the way. Yeah. So life gets in the way. Things like having unreasonable demands at work are really stressful for us, for people. Having lack of clarity over our role or uncertainty with business development. Yep. It really knocks us around. Yeah. A lack of autonomy and freedom, even in a personal relationship, will make a difference. Poor communication. Poor prospects for future, office politics, harassment, all these sorts of things that become fairly common in most workplace environments over time are actually really stressful for us. Yeah. And it's like the overtime thing that is the most, I guess, detrimental. It becomes normal, right? It becomes normal. Like, I remember, Sunny, when I was like in my high stress burnt out stage, and then I would be thinking that I'm normal, it's totally fine, I'm calm. Everyone else would look at me and say, V, just chill out. Just chill out. And I'm like, I am chilled out, Leave me alone. Leave me alone. In my head, I was like, you know what? It's fine. I'm calm. Yeah. But in reality, I was actually really highly stressed. I lost my period for 3 years. I couldn't actually lose weight, even though I was like thin. I wanted to lose weight, but it didn't happen for me. And it's me. I didn't actually realize that I was stressed at all. It's actually being aware, and I was convincing myself that stress or how I was feeling was normal, because everyone else around you is stressed, Totally. Yeah. And so one of the things that I think is really useful for us to see there is that we don't really learn. I mean, nothing teaches us how to regulate or become aware. Our eyes look outside, our ears hear outside. All of our senses are geared towards looking outside, and yet we've got this whole world inside of us, our bodies, which is where all of the stress is actually coming from
Yeah.
that we're getting blindsided by.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what I learned, and what I learned was an old way of looking at the body, the way that the Chinese looked at the body for the last couple thousand years, and it is such a different way of looking at the body. But what it allowed me to start to do was learn how to keep an eye on my own stress levels. That's not to say that I didn't deal with stress. I mean, as I told you earlier, I dealt with trauma and burnout, all that sort of stuff. But still, it kind of just gives you a framework where you can start to step back from the edge. Where in the past you might have noticed that, or you might find, I work really hard for 3 days and I get tired. Then I try and work hard for another couple of days. Then on Friday afternoon I go and I just eat a bunch of stuff or whatever, like those sorts of things. So rather than that being a predictable pattern that happens every week and you kind of beat yourself up and then do it again and then all that sort of stuff, you can start to go, oh no, I've become aware of the early warning signs or the progressive signals, and then you start to intervene in a lighter way earlier in the piece, so you're not dealing with the boom and the crash.
Yeah. So it's kind of like being proactive as opposed to reactive kind of
Totally. It's being proactive, but it's also being sensitive to ourselves. Yeah. Because one of the things that we're all trained to do is to be, like even in our industry, right? Which we're trained to kind of push, we're trained to get out there and market yourself, which means we're really learning to ignore a lot of those uncomfortable feelings that come up in our body, because we're like, I've got to go and pitch, I've got to go and network, and maybe we're nervous and shy, so we learn not to deal with that or not to feel that. But that means we're also not picking up on the other signals when our body goes, actually I'm feeling a bit stressed. Yeah.
So it's kind of like putting files in the filing cabinet and just closing cabinet without actually physically opening it.
Yeah.
Cool. So now let's open this filing cabinet, because I know that you guys want to be able to, I guess, live the healthiest lifestyle we can be. So Sunny here, I guess, is going to show you, I guess, what techniques or what can we do to kind of relieve stress.
Yep.
Especially just before we're going for that donut. I mean, how do you do that? What are your techniques?
If you're waiting until you're reaching for the donut, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I don't know that's going to work. I mean, I find that I would definitely go for the donut.
Yeah.
But no, if you're finding that there are certain things that are happening and the stress is building up and it feels like you can't take a break and you don't have time for a run, or there's a lot of effort for doing all that sort of stuff, then what I can offer are a few little things that you can put into your daily routine that will actually take the pressure off and will start to give you access to your own internal feeling state, which will put you in touch with yourself. As you know, that's really important.
Yes.
And that'll start a journey of being able to reduce stress levels.
Amazing.
So what we'll do, I guess, first is just talk about what the body feels. So it's all about, we're going to use feeling language today.
Okay.
All right. I know we're not normally all that comfortable with talking about feeling language. I'm trained as an engineer, and you trained at a high level, so I'm sure feelings, they weren't part of my training, and maybe, I don't know. But the thing with feelings is it's accessing a different part of our brain. And the feeling part of our brain is the part that's much more likely to be really overactive when we're stressed.
Yeah.
So by listening to it when it's not like really overactive, we can start to pull out those triggers so that they don't become a landmine later on.
Yeah.
So one of the things to notice is, we can do it now.
Yeah.
Right. Can you tell me what your body feels like when you're really stressed?
Well, I guess my shoulders get quite hunched.
Are they do this?
Yeah, they do. They get quite hunched, and in a way my chest kind of feels a bit smaller.
Yeah, so breathing?
My chest kind of feels smaller. Breathing. Maybe faster breathing. And I just feel like my head it's just in my head. I know that I'm just in my head. That's how I feel.
What is that like?
It's just like a
thinking about stuff, or
brain can't switch off. Like maybe even just before bed sometimes. Like that's when you know that you're really highly stressed. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Well, I mean, we've all been there. So
we've all been there, definitely.
So the general principle I wanted to get to was what I feel like in my body, stressed versus not stressed, is when I'm stressed, it feels like there's pressure, and it doesn't feel like there's a lot of space. It feels like I've got there's weight and there's restriction and there's density and there's all sorts of kind of things pushing in whether it's in the throat or the chest or the stomach or as you said the neck and the shoulders. The thing to feel into is that generally speaking, stress or the sympathetic nervous system is going to make us feel that way.
Yeah.
The fascinating thing is that if we can learn to feel another way, or we can learn to feel through that, we can start to turn it off. So the next thing I want to do is I want you to think about a time that you had a really good holiday.
Yep.
And talk me through it.
Just trying to think of a holiday. Which holiday should I pick?
Okay.
No, I've got one.
Okay.
I've got one.
Tell me.
Okay, so.
I don't want you to really paint the scene. I'm assuming you're in nature somewhere?
Yeah.
I don't want you to paint the scene for me.
Paint the scene. Okay, cool. So, sandy area, so a beach, and then the waves just crashing through, and I can just see through the horizon, wind blowing in my hair.
What colour's the water?
Blue.
Yeah?
Yeah, ocean blue.
Ocean blue. Alright. and what temperature is the sand on your skin? I'm walking on the sand.
No, quite nice actually. Warm, maybe, I don't know, just say 30 degrees. Is that hot?
Yeah.
That's pretty
hot. And so the thing is, and so when you tread on the sand, can you feel the water coming up through the sand?
Yeah, and all through my toes.
Yeah.
As I walk through every step.
And so we feel the wind, we become aware. So what's going on in the sky?
It's really calm. Do I close my eyes? It's calm. Really calm, clear. There's sort of bird.
Yeah, clouds.
Cloud? Yeah. Just clear.
Yeah. What sort of vegetation is around? Is it just seaweed?
No seaweed, it's just a couple of trees in the background.
Yeah.
Some rocks on the horizon.
Right, okay. So, the funny thing is, if we're on a holiday, or if we're really learning how to tune our mind into what it felt like being on a holiday, our nervous system knows no different. So there was actually a study that was done after the Boston bombings. So was it like in 2004 maybe? And they found that with the 24-hour news that was just bombarding people with news of the Boston bombings, they found that people that watched 6 hours of the coverage were more anxious and traumatized, if you will, than the people who are actually not far from the blast radius and who are actually there.
Yeah.
So this is actually really interesting when you think about, like, we're actually carrying a very powerful imagination that for the large part we don't know what to do with, and so we kind of let it run. You know, it's said that our imagination is a better servant than master.
Yeah.
And it doesn't serve us because we don't know what to do with it.
No. Well, I did hear that your brain can't actually tell the difference between the subconscious and the conscious. Oh no, the real and your imagination. Sorry. So what's actually real, your memory, or what you actually imagine.
Totally.
Yeah. So it's kind of like a blur.
Totally.
Right.
So all of these old Chinese practices that I learned were about opening up those pathways in the subconscious down into the body, because the body and the mind and the brain are interacting. So it's a feedback loop, so that we can really tap into that principle and totally free the body from all stress. And in fact, not only can we free the body from stress in a normal sense, once you start to go deeply into it, you realise that there's always a level of tension or a level of kind of, not even anxiety, but just kind of like effort that's unnecessary, that's always there, and you start to be able to go deeper and deeper. And what it looks like is actually no more complicated than what you were doing just then. So how hard do you think it would be for your clients and your to tap into that?
Super easy. Well, guys, this is why we emphasize so much in the program visualizations every morning. And you said before how important it is to do daily routines.
I believe that you build habits that then support you.
Totally, absolutely. So the visualization. So this is why I emphasize so much on the visualization side of things at the start of your day, to really get you kick-started in terms of where you want to be, and also get you in this calm state to be able to be de-stressed and like rid yourself of all these negative kind of emotions that actually come out in our day-to-day lives. So Sunny, I guess, do you have any other tips and tricks?
Totally.
Anything else as to what you want to tell?
So we're gonna work with that principle, and there's a few little daily practices you can do that will support that. So one of the things that you probably started to notice, and I certainly do when I do this practice, is that you go, oh, my body feels like it's expanding.
We're open.
And the other thing is you start to feel, oh, it feels like the boundary between my skin and the environment around me is not quite as hard and fixed. So allowing ourselves to remember that means that we can actually start to build the neural networks or the muscle memory of being able to get back there. Okay? So one of the things that we can do every day, all the time, to do that is actually smile with our eyes. It actually takes no more time.
That's so interesting. I'm smiling at you guys.
There you go.
I'm smiling.
And the thing is, the eyes are part of the nervous system. So we start with the eyes, and that has an impact on the whole nervous system. And the thing is, people often say, "Oh, I've got no time to meditate," and the question is, how much longer does it take to smile? The challenge then is not going to be, "Oh, I don't have time to do it." The challenge is going to be, "Oh, I'm either super forgetful, or I'm not as motivated to actually do something about it as I thought, or I do it and then I forget and then I do it again," which just means it's just developing a practice.
Yeah. So you're right, developing a practice. Yeah. I love that. I love that.
So you've already talked about building habits, I'm sure.
Yes.
So people can kind of just add this to their daily, brushing their teeth or whatever. They kind of just have another little.
Yeah, I love that.
Cue.
I love that. That's awesome. Thanks, Sunny.
Do we want to do any more, or is that enough?
No. Well, I guess we've got so much value from you today. I mean, if anyone wants to get in contact with you, Sunny, what do you do? I guess. Right. How do we get in contact with you?
Okay, so this is my little logo here. I am Taoist Embodied Healing. So Taoist is an old Chinese word that just means method or model. And so I am, through my own experience, I guess, and through the people that I've been trained by, skilled at helping people to identify where the stresses are in their body and in their mind and in their nervous system, and finding ways that they can relieve them when they've been told actually previously it wasn't possible. Yeah. And the thing is, because we are a stressed society and we don't really do a lot about it, it turns